Have you ever been in a room and felt something that didn't feel dangerous, but you were filled with anxiety? If you saw something impossible at the moment everything should have gone wrong, would you ever tell anyone? Maybe you've thought you've broken free from something negative, only for it to come back later in a far worse form. How would you cope if you, and only you, thought something was taking a nefarious interest in your unborn children? And could one life begin while something else waits patiently for another to end? These are the questions that we'll look at in today's episode of The Dark Paranormal. Live from Liverpool, The Dark Paranormal with Kevin Eustace. Hello everyone and welcome to the penultimate episode of this season of The Dark Paranormal. It's been such an interesting week for me and the guys on the team. We've dealt with things that we wouldn't normally deal with or haven't dealt with in the past. And they've been things such as maybe people have plagiarized other people's stories and experiences, which is something abhorrent that we would never condone. But at the same time, we found ourselves asking the question, why do we accept hundreds of people seeing shadow figures, yet if two people have a similar experience, just because that experience is slightly different than the norm, we default to plagiarism? It's certainly a topic that sparked a lot of debate amongst our team this week. Another one has been our mini-sode from this week, as the person who sent that in typed out their experience in a very articulate and almost literary style. Now, the points of view in the team ranged from just because somebody's doing their best to articulate their experience doesn't mean it's invented, to how can you read that and not say that's a fake story? It's too neat, it's too perfect in how it's presented. So to give you a little peek behind the scenes of what we do when we receive experiences like that, is we take a vote on whether it should go in. And then we await feedback from you guys to see what you guys think. And I think moving forward into next season, if we receive one of these on-the-fence team splitter experiences, I will, before reading out the experience, let you guys know this is one of the experiences which split our team and came down to a vote. And we'll let you guys decide if the story is real. And that's not to try and gamify the podcast. That's simply because we are dealing in the world where we can accept, when somebody writes in a way which suits us, that some demonic entity has grabbed them and dragged them down the stairs. But if somebody writes in and has the same experience, yet uses overly flowery poetic language, even I get alarm bells. But who's to say we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because that's just how they write. So moving forward, that's how we'll deal with those fence splitter sort of experiences. As usual, a huge thank you to all of our patrons who literally keep this independent show afloat. If you wish to get a free week trial at our highest tier, where you can get access to early releases, ad-free, and of course access to the back catalogue of Dark Bites, which is around 200 hours worth of extra content, just go to the show notes or go to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. But one of the best ways to support the show is both free, easy, and you can do it right now. Wherever you're sat right now, just click subscribe. That's 2 seconds and 1 thumb click and helps us massively. And of course, we're always accepting submissions regardless of the time. So although we have next season planned out, your experience could still end up on next season. So again, either go to the show notes and click on Submit My Experience, or go to thedarkparanormal.com and click on Submit My Experience. But right now we have the very important issue of our penultimate episode for this season. Now this is shorter than our usual experiences that we choose for the Dark Paranormal, But it's one that when we received it, we all agreed we've never had an experience like this. And so as we turn to look at the questions we posited at the start for the penultimate time this season, please lower the lights, make yourself comfortable, and most importantly, leave your disbelief at the door. As one of our listeners asks, my twin or my demon? Hello, Kevin. I will be keeping myself anonymous, and I'm not too sure why this has ended up coming to you. Well, I do know. I'm recently retired after 31 years teaching secondary English in Truro. I'm 63, and I've got more time than I know what to do with. And my daughter keeps telling me to journal. So I tried it, and I don't think this is what she had in mind, but I felt the need to get down an experience I had at a very important time of my life. One I've told very few people, the last one being maybe a decade ago. My husband, God rest his soul, did no parts, but I could tell each time I raised the topic, he was not going to be the best listener nor understander, and I fully understand why. I've spent most of my adult life being a very practical woman, making lesson plans, parent evenings, marking until past midnight. And practical women don't talk about things like this. But it's been sitting in my chest, in my mind, for close to 50 plus years. And I'm tired of carrying it. Some will put down what you're about to read as hysteria, as stress, as the effects of somebody trying to juggle a career and motherhood. And I'm not in any way, shape or form going to try and change their mind on that view. I can only tell you what I personally experienced. So I'm going to start at the beginning. We lived in a big old terraced house in Redruth at the time. High ceilings, cold in the winter, the kind of place that made sounds at night. My parents had bought it cheap because the previous owner had died in it, and no one wanted it. Or so our family story goes. But that would be Cornwall for you. I was a happy-go-lucky girl, and I remember it was a summer's day I'd been playing out in the back garden, and my mother called me in. She said she just wanted to have a chat. And we did have a chat about school, about my friends, about how things were going in general as life as a 7-year-old. And then my mother sat down, and she smoothed out the tablecloth the way she did when something serious was coming. She told me I'd been a twin. Apparently, a boy hadn't survived the birth. She said it quietly, like she was telling me the weather. But I could see her left hand, the one not on the table, was quivering. In hindsight, this didn't seem to be just someone informing someone of that news. It was as if she was also hiding something she didn't feel I was ready for yet. I couldn't tell you what I felt like at the time, but I do remember walking back almost with an element of excitement. And I remember sitting on the edge of my bed and thinking, so that's who it is. You see, I already knew I was not alone. I was maybe 8 or 9 when it started properly. I'd be in my room reading or playing, and I'd hear something behind me, a soft shuffling, like feet in socks on floorboards. I'd turn around and there'd be no one there. But each time I turned round, the sound returned. Toys would be moved into different positions. My books would be moved. Once I came into my room, and the blanket on my bed had been folded back on the side I didn't sleep on, as if someone had been lying there and had woken up. But I wasn't frightened. at first. That's the thing that's hard to explain. It felt familiar. It felt like company. But company that had something wrong with it. Not wrong like dangerous. Wrong like a word that sounds right but isn't spelled correctly. Or like when a friend arrives and they have an issue and you know it bothers them and you feel that well of unable to help them, unsure what to do, that uncomfortable feeling. Or when you meet someone for the first time and they instantly give you what the kids call the ick. And you don't know why, you don't understand why this person bothers you. They just do. And that lack of knowledge bothers you even more. So in the end, as I did even at that young age, you tell yourself there is no cause or effect, therefore you're being irrational, and you do your best to shake it off. But it lingers. And at that age, oh my, did it linger. Also, I'd been having this dream, the same dream every so often over about 3 years. I'd be coming down the stairs, and there'd be a little boy crouched on the second landing, and he was always wearing the same thing. Brown trousers, a grubby white shirt, old shoes that didn't seem to fit him right. He'd be playing jacks on the floorboards. When he looked up, his eyes were very dark and very sad, like he'd been waiting for a long, long time and was past being upset. "What are you doing here?" I'd ask him. I'd never get a response. He'd just reach up for my hand and lead me into the front room. Then he'd sit down on the sofa and cry. Not like a child cries, like an old man cries. And then he'd say very quietly, "I live here. They left me here a long, long time ago." And I'd wake up with my chest tight and my hands cold, even in the midst of summer. By the time I was 14, it had all changed. Whatever it was, it stopped feeling like a sad little boy and started feeling like something that resented me. Those shuffling sounds stopped, and instead, I'd see it at the edge of my vision. A dark shape, about my height, stood in a corner. Always in a corner. Always just out of direct sight. Like it understood that I'd dismiss anything if I looked straight on. The worst of it wasn't its shape or the fact it was there. The worst was what it did to the room. There'd be moments, doing homework, eating breakfast, things completely ordinary, and the temperature would just drop by several degrees in the space of a breath. Not the whole room, just the air directly behind me, always behind me. I'd sit there completely still, pencil in hand, aware of something stood close enough that I should have been able to hear it breathe. And that silence, which filled where breathing should have been, was worse than any sound it could have made. My neck would prickle, my eyes would water from not blinking. I'd count to 10 and turn around, and there's nothing there. Just my bedroom wallpaper, the sound of next door's TV coming through the wall. Some mornings I would wake up and I wouldn't feel like myself. Like something had been in there overnight and moved things around. I was 14, I didn't have the language for it. I just got on with things because that's what you do. This carried on for a few years, intermittent, varying in strength and in fear. But, much to the relief of my thankful young self, it went away when I left for university. Or at least, I thought it did.
Today's episode of The Dark Paranormal is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it. So your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Companies and affiliates' potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you know the 8th of March is International Women's Day, a day to celebrate women everywhere, recognizing just how much they do each and every day. I lost my mother at a young age, which some would say is misfortune, but it got me to know my nan who brought me up as a better person, and the strength she's shown shone through in my sister, who she brought up also, and she's now the strong matriarch of a family of her own. And believe me, the absolute seeming ease that she holds together her family can be so easy to overlook, as we sadly still have that stigma of, well, that's a woman's job, that's what a mother's meant to do, etc. But the emotional well-being of the women in our life can easily be overlooked. And therapy offers a safe space that they can take care of themselves in a way they deserve. And gentlemen, just stop and think about those unseen expectations they wake to daily. Their happiness isn't just a good thing, it's essential. And therapy can help create balance, set healthy boundaries, and support overall well-being for everyone. BetterHelp therapists work according to a strict code of conduct and are fully licensed in the US. A quick questionnaire will help identify your needs and preferences. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform. Your emotional well-being matters, so find some support and feel lighter in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com.
Skincare experts and dermatologists have often touted the benefits of indoor humidity as essential for healthy, glowing skin. But did you know dry air can start to harm your skin in as little as 30 minutes? For years, many people have relied on humidifiers for better skin, sleep, and overall wellness. But traditional models, bulky, mold-prone, and difficult to maintain. That's where Canopy Humidifier comes in. Recommended by leading dermatologists, Canopy is a completely reimagined humidifier designed to elevate any space, offering the ultimate in skincare and wellness benefits. Canopy's clean moisture combats dryness, dullness, and fine lines while strengthening the skin's barrier and boosting the effectiveness of topical skincare products. With its sleek design, Canopy is the cleanest and easiest humidifier on the market. With its unique technology, cleaning is as easy as popping it in the dishwasher. Go to getcanopy.co to save $25 on your Canopy humidifier purchase today with Canopy's filter subscription. Even better, use code PODCAST at checkout to save an additional 10% off your Canopy purchase. Your skin will thank you.
I spent my 20s being quite determinedly normal. Teacher training in Exeter, first post in a school outside of Bristol. Staff nights out, a string of unremarkable relationships. I didn't think much about it. Once in my mid-20s, I was marking books late in an empty classroom, and I heard the shuffling sound from my youth behind me. That old familiar friction against the floor, and I went absolutely cold. I sat completely still for maybe 30 seconds. Then a radiator pipe knocked somewhere in the building, and I kind of jolted awake and told myself that's all it had ever been. I packed my bag and I went home, and I didn't let myself think about it again. Writing that part down then has done something to me. I realize now that that was easier than it should have been. Looking back, it unsettles me just how quickly I put that down to a random knock elsewhere. I knew at the time it was the same sound I heard from my youth, twice, followed by a knock from a radiator. But who's to say that knock itself wasn't this thing? Yet, when you're in that youth, that exuberance of trying to move on through stages of your life, you don't have time to stop and consider the paranormal. Now I do. And literally writing out that experience in that classroom has made me question just how many other things passed me by due to my, for want of a better word, ignorance. Forgive me, as thoughts are now coming thick and fast of moments I second-guessed at that time, items moving in my sight, and me telling myself it was a wonky table, hearing random whispers and me telling myself it was people in the corridor. A key thing I'm realizing as I'm going through this train of thought of my history at that time is at no point whenever I saw any of these other or heard any of these other possible paranormal experiences I was in the midst of did I go to check. Because I think deep down, even at that age, I knew what the answer would be. Or should I say, I knew what I would find. And the answer is nothing. Nothing but that uncomfortable accompaniment. Obviously, from when my mother first told me about my twin and me growing from age 7 onwards, I had thought, as anyone would, these things could be down to the spirit of my twin. But as I've said earlier, when you're in the midst of trying to become an adult, you just do not have the time to contemplate the paranormal. Or at least, I didn't. Maybe it was that very lack of intrigue into what was going on that made it decide to considerably raise the stakes. I met David when I was 30. We were married at 32 and I fell pregnant. Twins. They do say it runs in families, so I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised. But everything started again. I was about 12 weeks along when I saw it in the nursery. I'd been in there painting the walls, the radio on in the background, ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I turned to get more paint, and there it was, stood in the corner by the window. But it wasn't the same. It was taller, much taller. Too tall for the room, really. It should have had to stoop, but it didn't. It seemed to fit itself into the space that it shouldn't be. Its arms were long and thin, too long, hanging down past where they should have stopped. Its legs were wrong too, thin and jointed in a way that made me think of a spider more than a person. Just stood there facing me. I'd always assumed it was featureless, but the slightest change in what would be its face made me realize it had 2 pinhole eyes that were yellow and not blinking. I froze as I just took in this awful wrongness about its shape. I dropped the brush and moved backwards slowly towards the door. It's funny the things you think about, but as I'm typing, I recall being in an almost trance, cleaning up that paint stain from the carpet, replaying the image much later on. But back to the moment. I managed to walk downstairs, backwards. I went into the kitchen and I sat at the table. I didn't move for about 20 minutes. David came in from outside. He could see I was in absolute shock. He sat down and asked me what was wrong. I decided I would try and tell him. I think I got about as far as strange figure when I could see him sort of lean back. He didn't believe me. He was kind about it, he was always kind. But I could see in his face that I best not go on much longer. He said something about my hormones and the anxiety of it all and my twin pregnancy and all the rest of it, and suggested I speak to the midwife about how I was feeling. So I stopped telling him things after that. It was a few weeks later when we were in the living room after dinner. David was in the armchair reading. I was on the sofa with my feet up. It was completely quiet, but David's glass of water was moving across the coffee table inch by inch as if being pushed by a finger until it was flung from the edge and smashed on the floor. No table incline, no wet surface, the water sloshing around as it was pushed, each and every time. David didn't see as he had his newspaper up in front of his face, and I watched as it made its quick journey and descent. David jumped. What happened there? Oh, I had my feet on the coffee table and I've nudged it. I'm sorry, I'll clean it up now. I just could not let David know what was going on. I knew he wouldn't believe me. He didn't see it happen. And what with my talk of strange figures in corners, I just, for some reason, decided to take on the burden of whatever this thing was. As I walked past David to get the cleaning equipment, I could see he was looking at the coffee table, and I thought he was realizing how far away my feet were from the glass, and I genuinely debated telling him there and then. I think I even stopped, but I very quickly walked on. Once I'd removed the glass and I'd tidied up the area, I stood in the kitchen, leaning against. Once I'd tidied the glass away and emptied the shards into the bin, I stood at that kitchen sink for about 10 minutes. I just couldn't go back into that living room. So I said I was feeling sleepy and I headed off to bed. I had to carry it alone. Every few days I'd see it somewhere in the house, the hallway, the top of the stairs, once reflected in the dark kitchen window at night, again causing me to drop a glass. It never moved whenever I saw it. It would just stand there with those long arms and those little yellow unblinking eyes. Then, in my 7th month, it began doing something specific. I'd wake in the night, and it would be at the foot of the bed, standing still, that long shape almost reaching the ceiling. And then it would hold out one hand. It would extend 2 fingers towards my stomach. Then, slowly, not quickly. It was never quick. It always wanted me to watch. It would fold one finger down, and its small pinhole yellow eyes would change in a way which let me know it was smiling at me. 1 finger left. I knew what that meant. I don't know how I knew, but I did. It was telling me only one of them was going to make it. It was telling me it was counting my living children. I stopped sleeping. I lay awake listening to David breathing and watching the corner of the room, telling myself this wasn't real, but knowing it was. My contractions started on a Wednesday night in February. Cold, raining hard. David drove and I sat in the passenger seat with my coat over me, trying to breathe through the contractions, watching the road on behalf of David, who was just as panicked as I. At some point, I looked in the rear view mirror. It was in the back seat, sitting completely still, that long folded shape somehow fitting into a Ford Focus, watching me through the mirror, its eyes still implying it was smiling. And then I heard a sound, a low, rhythmic chuckle, not a laugh, not anything so human as that, more like a sound a thing makes when it's satisfied. David put his hand on my stomach and said, "Keep breathing, we're almost there." He clearly didn't hear a thing. And I didn't say a word. I just faced directly forward and stared at the road. I remember nothing from the car to the delivery room, but I do remember the utter panic of being in the delivery room. I must have looked like a woman possessed. My head was looking at every possible open doorway, every corner, to see if this thing had followed me into the hospital. The contractions quickened, I was given gas, everything was a bit of a blur. And then my daughter was born. Panic filled my chest, and I heard her cry. Immediately, part relief and part pain filled me as I screamed as I finally birthed my son. I didn't hear her cry. A nurse picked my son up and placed him on a table behind her, and all the doctors and nurses gathered around that table, giving the smile to me that's meant to say, "You're okay," but really says, "We're in trouble." Still no cry. They were frantically working, and I just couldn't watch. I turned my face away and I looked at the door. And in the window of the door, something was pressed against the glass on the other side. Not a face exactly, the shape of one. Dark, flat, like a burn mark in the shape of a person's head. Except for the eyes. 2 points of dull yellow light. Completely still. Not dramatic. Not what I'd imagined in all those months of dread. This was patient. The way it had always been patient. In my mind I was screaming, "Look at me, not him. Look at me, not him. Look at me, not..." My son cried. I glanced at that table as the doctors and nurses presented my newly wrapped son. I cried and I glanced back at the door. The shape was gone, replaced by the fluorescent lights of the corridor. Just gone. And I don't think I've seen it once since. Not once. My son has twin daughters of his own now. It does run in families, as I say. He doesn't know any of this. I've never told him, and I don't intend to. But you can imagine my fear when his partner was pregnant. He's a happy, healthy man, and both of his girls are noisy and ridiculous, and they come and dig up my garden when they visit, and I wouldn't change a thing. I still have no idea what it was. I've thought about it most of my life, and I still don't know. Maybe it was my brother? What was left of him anyway? Or what might have been him if things had gone differently? Maybe it was something else entirely that just found a way through that particular door. Maybe this thing was what got to my mother. I'm a retired English teacher, not a psychic. I've never been comfortable with explanations I can't support. But what I can say is what I know I saw. And what I know is that thing is gone. And that's good enough for me. But by all means, any theories or ideas you or your listeners may have, I'd be more than grateful to hear. All the best, Anonymous. Well, as I say, we do like to try and save our most intriguing stories and experiences for towards the end of a season. And Anonymous? Genuinely, I think that's the best penultimate episode we've ever covered. I know when an episode is special because mid-recording it, I want to stop and I want to research. And that's exactly what I wanted to do as I'm hearing about this thing. And I'm thinking about demons that I've heard from Mesopotamia that steal children. And I just wanted to go on a deep dive as I'm reading out the episode. And believe me, when I finish recording this, that's just what I'm going to do. But I will leave it to our listeners to make what they will of this terrifying episode. For me, it's up there with some of the very best we've received. And I want to thank you so much for sending in this experience. Now, everyone, please hit subscribe because next week we have our finale. And as I said just then, we like to save our best pieces that we get for the end of a season. That's what kind of makes a finale. And you won't want to miss next week's finale, believe me. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me on this penultimate episode. For now, it's goodbye. And remember, if you discuss the paranormal, always leave some of your disbelief at the door. And I will see you next week for our finale of this season's Dark Paranormal.